Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Alex and Scott from the DMs Guild. They are working on a pretty big collab project with Micah as well. Um, I'm sorry, I forget Micah's last name.
Michael Watt.
Michael Watt, yeah. And which we've had him on the past for the project he's working on with Richard Knack. So, if you guys want to just like introduce yourself briefly, what you each do, you can start, Alex, and we move on to Scott.
Yeah, I'm just a DM's Guild creator. I've been doing it for coming up on a year now. Um, Never done content publishing or put myself out there with homebrew or anything before that point. But it's been a pretty crazy year, and now I think this upcoming project's the biggest one I've ever had the most involvement in. So I'd say it's been pretty successful so far.
Cool, Scott.
I'm Scott Bean, and I've been developing products on the DMs Guild for about a year and a half now. And I just, this is my first, I'm learning process getting into publishing, and it's been a great journey so far. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons through all the editions.
Nice. So, you guys had reached out to me because you're working on a collab project over in the DMs Guild, and a lot of those seem to be springing up nowadays, more and more often, which is cool. Anytime we can work with other people, and I think it really improves the process. So let's jump into that. What are you guys working on?
Scott, I
Well,
mean, it's your project, yeah.
yeah. Originally, I came up with, I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, I think we could use a little bit of faith in the fifth edition, and got that idea, and I threw up the idea in it's a group in Facebook called the Dungeon Masters Guild Creators Circle, and I had quite a few responses, and we formed a group on Facebook with about I believe about 7 of us. Um, a lot of the people dropped out because it just seemed the scope of it was so large, and they were like, well, this is going to be really substantial. It'll probably take a long time. It'd be a big commitment. In the end, it ended up with Alex and Micah and I spearheading this project together, and it's just been a great experience so far. And I kind of took on many roles: editor, proofreader, along with others, and uh, layout and editing. I just learning so many things, because I'm fairly new at it. I've just a lot to learn here. It's big learning process. Alex and Micah have been great writers on the project. I've been really impressed with what they've submitted, and it's been going great.
How much research did you guys have to do? Like, were you already like big fans of the realms and kind of knew a lot of this stuff, or was this like a research project?
I'd say it was kind of a research project. I mean, Scott, you said you've played through most of the different editions. I actually started with 3.5. I mean, didn't play any as a kid. It wasn't until high school that I even got into D&D at all. So a lot of our material that we went to was actually from like second edition, Faiths and Pantheons, Faiths and Avatars, Powers and Pantheons. These are the core source books that we went back to, and they write so freaking much in those older editions. It's like a massive info dump. So we spent a lot of our inspiration for the different features and powers and things like that, especially for the classes, came from having to really parse through all that text and try to pull out, all the stuff that we thought would be flavorful and fun and relevant, to what we were doing. And some of it was kind of direct conversion. Some of it was just sort of interpretive. So I'd say, yeah, there's a lot of research because we started this thing back in like was it September, and now it's pushing June, and we're finally like, okay, I think we're about ready. So it's been over 6 7 months plus of the three of us working on this thing.
Do you by chance know when the Realms was launched? I know we got it in drips and drabs in Dragon Magazine from Ed Greenwood. It was like the very beginning before it became an actual campaign setting. You know, I know it was launched in, you know, AD&D, and you know it's a huge swath of time to span from then to now.
Yeah.
So you know, so that's just a ton of information to sift through, and I just imagine like there was so many different source books, not even just the ones that were specifically geared towards deities and faith, for you know, for the realms, but other like box sets that were like regional, that probably had information in it as well.
Yeah, I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, I think the Forgotten Realms launched officially in like the late '80s. I think it's been around longer, but I think it was like late '80s that it became like an official thing. But yeah, man, I remember. I mean, even in fifth edition, they've had some stuff with the deities, but like I said before, it doesn't compare at all to what they had in the original supplements and stuff. They would take Faiths and Avatars was one of our key supplements that we drew from, and each deity has an entry, and they'll go on for 5-6 pages just talking about a single deity and like their powers, what their church does, all this stuff. And you don't see that in fifth edition anymore, because I think with fifth edition they understood, okay, if you know the Forgotten Realms, if you've been playing for a while, you know some of this backstory, some of this extra history. We don't need to print all this again. So I think they went a little bit more hands off with the further you get into the editions, the more hands off they tend to get with repeating large chunks of info. But yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, I feel like too you can go to Drive Through RPG and maybe even the DM's Guild now and buy like the PDFs of all the old material.
Right. Yeah.
So like that stuff's still going to be relevant, you know, when you're talking lore. Hey folks, if you have questions and you want to ask them, feel free. Just put question in front of them. Makes them a lot easier to for us to pull them out. Also, as always, you can find links in the description to socials and also where to find these guys on the DM's Guild, as well as Mike as well. Honey Drop wants to know, how do you pronounce saloon?
I always mess this up. I pronounce it saloon. I know it's like saloon. Is it saloone? It's like saloony, saloone.
That's how I pronounce it, as saloon.
Yeah, I have no idea. Look, I'm really strange in the fact that I look at a word and I pronounce it exactly how they write it. I know that's not how the English language works, but you know what? I'm waiting for it to conform to my reality. We fight with the fans all the time over pronunciation. They love to drill us on that pretty deep. We mispronounce everything. And then
Annihilation has been really fun so far for exactly that reason.
Yeah, well, you know, it is kind of cool that they did phonetically spell things out in there and tell you how things are spelled, which is a great idea. Although they're killing a lot of great D&D debates and maybe arguments at the tables by doing that. Also, with D&D Beyond doing the, you could actually like click on words and you can hear Mercer Ray or Matt Mercer say them.
Right.
Which I wonder if that makes them right, or they've just gotten the opportunity to choose how words are being said now.
Right. You know, next season on Dice Camera Action, Chris Perkins is going to make a point of looking up every D&D term he hasn't said so far and saying it on stream so that it becomes, you know, official.
Making it canon, yeah.
That's good.
You know, life goals. What are you gonna do? Nerd Popcliff has a question. Let me see what we got here. We got I have an in-depth, possibly episode-worthy idea I'd like to pose. Well, that's something you should probably ask me. Just message me somewhere or Gmail us. We also have, why does Goblin... no, that has nothing to do with these guys. Come on, guys. Forgotten Realms. That's where we're at today. Get your head in the game, kid. So, 200 pages. How did you guys parse that out?
Well, we started with yeah, the scope of this project. That's one thing you were talking about is like when the Forgotten Realms. I remember it as early as '84, looking at Dragon magazine for with Gen Con coming up and all that, and so it's been around for a long time, and there's so much content. We had to limit the scope on this, or it could potentially be just unpublishable. So what we did is we just actually Micah and Alex helped rein in the scope of this, because originally when I started the project by myself, I was like, I'm going to go through all the deities and create archetypes for everyone, and they're like, oh, wait a second, that's going to be too big. So we're like, let's limit this to the 50 main gods in the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. And so when we developed that and we did all our submissions, I was reviewing them and I was like, well, we have a lot of crunch here, a little bit of flavor. I was like, I'd like to have as many role-playing options and backgrounds, story and things like that. People that could take it and develop their characters in detail. And so I reached out to Alex because I was so busy on quite a few projects, and so was Mike. And I was like, hey, could you maybe come up with some flavor for this? And so I was still unsure about the actual what the length was going to be, but I was figuring around 200, 250, and we had room to add some flavor to it. So and then Alex picked up on that, and he did a lot of the flavor. He did the deeper faith section at the beginning, and some of the, we all did a little bit, contributed on the magic items. We're like, well, you got to have some holy magic items, and I was like, well, how about holy texts and things like that? And Alex picked up on that too, and Phil did a really great job on that, and so that's where we ended up with that. Says, well, we kind of have to rein it in there, because if we keep on adding content, it's going to get really big and enormous. And then I heard from one bookshelf about the possibility of a print, and I was like, well, I don't want this to be too costly for consumers. So I was like, well, I think we're right about where we need to be right now. And I think they both did a great job, with the writing content and the additional content that we added to this.
So 200 pages is like kind of like a sweet spot. I think like the 150 to 200. Because if it's too small, it's not really worth printing, in my opinion. Anyway, it's not going to have the same feel. It becomes more of a pamphlet than a book. So it does have to have a little heft to it in order to put it into a book. So Zareth Gaming's question is, my favorite Forgotten Realms deity is Loth and Verun. What are some of your favorites?
I like Azuth a lot, because I like the connection with spells, and Mistra. I've always favored running wizards, and I like Loth because I remember running Descent into the Depths of the Earth a while back, and that was a very fun experience. So I'd like to consider possibly doing some of the other gods in the that are now, they actually not just Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. I think with the Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, they have some deities in there as well. So
yeah, definitely they do talk to that a little bit throughout the sections. I'm not all the way through, but even like in the very first section, you have the Blood War, and Asmodeus is basically a deity. So
yeah, he's actually one of the deities we have, because in the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, on like the what they call the main pantheon, the list of 48 deities, he's listed on there. So we said, well, it's got, they consider him in 5th edition to basically be deity level. So we ended up including him as one of our cleric and paladin options. I wrote the content for him. He's fun. He's a fun guy.
Yeah, I don't know if you've checked out Mordenkainen's yet, but like the entry on Asmodeus in there is really good.
Haven't actually picked it up yet, but hoping to soon. I just haven't had a chance to yet.
All you have to know is he bored the Celestials into defeat. So,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty sweet, and he got a cool artifact out of the deal. But in AD&D, they did stat him like he was in the monster manual. He was one of the guys you could fight.
Yeah, I think it was kind of cool how second edition, they statted out basically the avatars of basically all the deities, all the supplements that we drew from. They made a point of telling you what the powers were, like specific abilities, the kind of spells and things they were capable of doing. I respect that fifth edition has gotten away from that. I like that they've got some of like the demons, Yunagul and things like that, or Yunagu and powers like that. I understand why they don't have full-on gods as stat blocks, because I think they want you to treat deities as more of role-playing motivators than just another stat block for you to kill, basically.
I think Spoonie said it best. If you stat it, they will kill it.
Right.
Is essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And if you don't want your gods dying, don't give them stats.
Yeah.
Never underestimate your player's ability to murder hobo something. James Leslie, when working with different faiths, will you be looking at the occurrence of the time of troubles, or will you be looking at any of the chosen deities?
Chosen the deities. We didn't get way into like a timeline of history for the different gods. The Deeper Faiths chapter has some flavor about the organization of the church. For some of the deities, you'll get some of that history with it, because it's part of how the church celebrates how they operate. And of course, there's little tiny bits for each deity. In the crunch section, each deity has its own section where it introduces it. The paladin oath has some flavor that relates to the deity in the paladin oath, and the cleric domains have flavor that relates to how clerics are interacted with, how they operate under that certain deity. We didn't get so much into the history of it, because once you start retyping out all of the history, you turn into a 50-page chapter of text, which a lot of people would definitely find helpful. But I think we wanted to balance out what was directly applicable to players and DMs as they're running their game or as they're playing their characters, more than just rehashing the history of the realms, which you can find. You can find that kind of stuff online very, very easily. So we wanted to kind of focus more on how to enable getting play at the table.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I looked at that, and we do mention some maybe events and histories, but we don't really get into it much. I wanted the book to kind of fit in with some of those earlier products. So like I said, are available on the DM's Guild. They have faiths and avatars, faiths and pantheons, powers and pantheons, where if someone does want to get into more detail, they could pick up one of those products. And although we have some summary text that basically summarizes what's in there, there's a lot more detail in there that they could use to to gain some background and depth to the character. I'm all about the immersive role-playing aspect to it. So if they do desire that, they can pick up some of those products on the DM's Guild. And there are also products dedicated specifically just to the timeline. I believe just entire books of the timeline. So.
And Swordcoast Adventurer's Guide, actually, in their sections for the main deities, like they've got written out paragraphs about the different deities, and they kind of do brief overviews of the personalities and a little bit of the history of the deities there too. So I think we kind of figured, well, 5th edition already has some brief history intros for these guys. like, we don't want to step on official products' toes, you know, and giving them that kind of information again, you know, because if they've already done it for 5th edition, you know, that's the canon of, you know, what the deity is. So,
and you know, that absolutely makes sense. So Douglas wants to know, and it kind of dovetails into a question I was going to ask anyway. We have more divine domains for 5e. How many? I missed Justice Domain, Death Domain, Darkness Domain, Magic Domain, etc. So I was going to say, you know, that kind of dovetails the fact that, you know, when I was flipping through it, I did notice you do have more domain sections for the clerics. You know, it goes over like holy days and holidays. There's sections for the paladins that I saw as well. Magic items, holy text, like you guys said. So it does, you know, yes, it goes into it. Do you know how many domains you guys added?
Should be 50. We did a paladin oath and a cleric domain specific to each of the 50 deities in there. So there's 50 deities. Each one of those has a specific tailored paladin oath. And I see on the chat there's another question about spells and things like that. So this, to answer both the questions, every deity has a paladin oath and a cleric domain that are specifically tailored to be a representative of that deity. And then to kind of give them more variance and to flesh them out a little bit more, we also did spell conversions from old editions. Faiths and Avatars and those kind of books had deity-specific spells for their clerics and paladins, and we converted some of those over to kind of flesh out the spell lists for the domains and the paladin oaths, so that you wouldn't just have like the same 30, you know, spells for these two classes over and over and over and over again. All of the different paladin oaths and cleric domains have deity specific spells to help you kind of further push that whole, you know, I'm a representative of this deity specifically.
So how many spells did you guys end up adding?
Oh my God.
I think I did a count as like 176.
Is this seriously how many it is?
I believe so.
Wow. Okay. I actually would not put it that high, but yeah, because we did probably, I mean, there's 50 deities, and we try to do at least 2 or 3 each one, and then some deities, like especially Azuth and ones like that, you got a few more because they had more that were able to be converted. So okay, yeah, if he says 170 something, that's about where.
So that's a lot of new spells. That's a lot of new domains. That's a lot of oaths for paladins to take. Yeah. Were you guys always fans of the Forgotten Realms? And if so, how did you come into it? That's a question from DM Don.
I was very interested into the Forgotten Realms. First time I saw that back in 1984, I'm like, I was asking my buddy because he played D&D before I did. And I was like, hey, what's this Forgotten Realms? And I'm like, that sounds pretty interesting. And he's like, oh, that's a world and D&D. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's just good. But I always, when I was playing first edition, I just ran my own fantasy world. So I really didn't pick it up in earnest until the 5th edition. You know, when I just launched it, it's like the official campaign setting. It's the only one that they've done. And I says, well, I'm really going to embrace that. But I've done some. I skimmed through and read some of the content through the years. So just now, this edition is when I was like, it's time to dive in and really get a good look at the realms. And I'm not sure what other settings that they have planned. So I'm like, well, let's get into this. And with the DMs Guild licensing, opening it up for developers, I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity to get in there and get into some detail about what makes the realms tick, so to speak. And it's been a great journey so far. It's been fun.
I'm going to lose a little bit of nerd cred here. I've never played another D&D setting, official setting, other than Forgotten Realms.
I don't know if that's doubling down or losing nerd cred. I was waiting to be like, I fucking hate the realms.
No, I really like the realms. And I really, really like, I've read all about Eberron. In fact, I picked up Dragonlance books before I ever played D&D. I had no idea that Dragonlance was associated with Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of funny until I was already getting into D&D. But I've never played in a Dragonlance setting game. When I played in high school, I was mostly a player, and everyone I played with was running Forgotten Realms games. More or less, they would be a little bit more loosely or closely associated with the official lore, but it was always in the Forgotten Realms. And like Scott said, fifth edition is it's all realms all the time so far, with the exception of Curse of Strahd. So that's kind of what's out there right now, and that's what's readily available. So just kind of kept on trucking with it.
They are cramming it down our throats for sure. Well, so it's kind of weird for us. Like we kind of bust balls a little bit and call it forgettable realms because it's generic fantasy, Kryn generic fantasy, Greyhawk generic fantasy. I could stack up enough novels to hide behind from those settings. I loved reading stories in those settings. We just like when we're doing, if we're going to do generic fantasy, we just play our own thing. Like for us, we've always been attracted to the official settings that were different than generic fantasy. Like Ravenloft, Dark Sun, Eberron. They all spoke to us in different ways. But we were always fans of like the novels and reading things. Like someone mentioned Time of Troubles, and Time of Troubles to this day, in my opinion, is like one of the best trilogies to come out of Forgotten Realms. Again, this is me like remembering reading it as a teen as well. I've also learned not to look back at some of the things I used to love and cherish, so that I can maintain those fond memories. So I don't know how well it would hold up today, but a lot of the Forgotten Realms novels were really great. Another one, Threat from the Sea, Mel Autumn wrote that, and he actually didn't. I don't think he actually wrote that much in Forgotten Realms, but he did that series, and it was amazing. Like when in 4th edition they put out a Gamma World book, and I saw his name on it. I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe it. Yeah, I don't think he's written for them, because if you look at his credits, like he writes for TV shows and a bunch of different stuff that are a bit more high profile. And unfortunately, like we were talking about pay what you want a little bit beforehand. And like that's a direct correlation to that conversation, because like that's like talent that leaves the niche and leaves the industry to go to other places because there's probably a lot more money there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And speaking of money, Fragginator wants to know what's the price point looking like.
We don't have a final price point on that yet. I think, well, actually, the PDF we've always had set at around $14.95. As far as the printing costs, we're thinking about a couple of different options. I want it to be affordable for everybody, so I might offer a couple of different options, but we'll discuss that between us. As far as like there's a standard color, but there's a lot of artwork in here. And a lot of it is very good, and I really like the artwork. So I'd like that to print out and shine. If somebody wants to get the premium color, I'd like that to have that option available, and that might run the price up. I think that's going to be probably about $5 more than like a standard color. And I'm thinking we're going to try to keep it around $29 to $34.95. But it's probably, with those pages, might run up to $39.95. I don't want to go too much higher than that. I'm going to have to see about that once we haven't submitted it for the print yet, so we'll have to get feedback from One Bookshelf on that, and see if we'll be good to go, if there's any adjustments we need to make, and then we'll have our final cost. But it looks like around 200 pages, and I looked at the premium color. Probably looking right around $39.95 for that in print, and then $14.95 for the PDF. And we haven't discussed both together yet. So,
hey Scott, can you try jiggling your connection, your wire for your headphones? See if that is plugged in a little.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know.
And as far as the the print costs. One of the difficulties is there's not a lot of print on demand available on the DMs Guild right now. Like, I think there's been maybe 10 products or so far that have been offered any kind of physical printing option. It's widely available on Drive-Thru RPG, but I've never published there before. It's very new for us, this whole process, because it's the same company, One Bookshelf that does all this. So the final price for the print copies is really, as you can tell, kind of up in the air, because we just don't really know what they're going to come back to us with, because they will set a price for how much it costs to print the book. And that kind of becomes the bare minimum. And if you set it at the bare minimum, then we're not making anything. We're essentially just, that would just be the printing cost and nothing for the creators. So the options that have been on the guild so far, Monsters of the Guild, is a standard heavyweight hardcover printing option, and that runs at $30. And then you've got Xanathar's Extraordinary Vault, which is the big item compendium from NT Black and RP Davis and Travis Legge, is also at about $30 for premium heavyweight. So premium versus standard, both of them hardcover, both at $30. Xanathar's is at like 100 pages, and Monsters of the Guild is like 160 or so. So yeah, we're trying to look at. We would like to do a premium printing option for the highest possible image quality, page quality, and everything else. But of course, we've got more pages than Monsters of the Guild, and that's it. That's running at about 30. So yeah, like Scott said, we're gonna send them. We're sending them the electronic file to determine how much the print cost is going to be, and then we're going to have to go back and forth and kind of decide, what the best pricing option is going to be, because obviously we don't want people to spend crap loads of money just for the hardcover. So we'll have to see what One Bookshelf says about all that.
So to be determined if you guys are figuring it out. Yeah. Understood. So the one lazy guy, are you guys insane? This project sounds amazing, even more so for the amount of effort y'all seem to have put into it. Good job. Good luck with your future work. Can't wait.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of people are definitely going to be interested in checking this out. I have a question. Do you guys find it difficult to get your products out there and seen on the DMs Guild? My perception is that there's a lot of people creating a lot of different stuff over there. So it's how do you get heard in all that noise?
It is very difficult. There's just like a high submission rate there, and is my audio better now? Yeah, there's a very high submission rate. Just have to get it kind of I look at the timing of it, and it seems like I'll wait till later in the day toward the end of the week, because it seems like sometimes during the day you get a huge dump of pay on demand, pay what you want, and other titles that just flood the whole front page. And I was like, I'll just wait until I see one of those, and then okay, maybe it's time to release, and so it doesn't get bumped 3 pages over in the scrolling. But yes, it is. So, and it's important to be active. And I think one's a good thing about collaborative projects, instead of leaving it to one person, like an individual designer that wants to publish something. I think what's good about the collaborative projects is you get several people that can promote it. And also there's the workload on something like that. And people want substantial content usually too, especially if they're going to pay for something. They want to get something for what they put their money toward. So you get several designers working toward developing project. You can create a substantial product, and then you'll have more people to help promote it. And I think that's important. But yeah, it's a difficult thing. The marketing aspects of this is something that's been very difficult for people, because that's just a role in company or whatever. So that's about wearing several hats and trying to do many things good, and that's difficult to do.
Yeah, social media plays a really really big part. We try to there's a really big DMs Guild specifically, but also general D&D presence on Twitter. That's probably one of my biggest platforms for trying to get the word out. There's different Facebook groups. There's the giant, 5th edition group, but posting something on there is like throwing a paper boat in a river. Like it's going to get swept away instantly. It's hard to get traction on there. I tend to post a lot of my releases on Reddit, which Reddit is a whole different beast trying to advertise on, as other creators can attest to. They tend to be very allergic to paid content. So if I've had pay what you want, those kind of freebie supplements I was talking with you about earlier. Those will reach the front page of the D&D subreddit and stay up there for a full day, because it's it's fun, creative, and most importantly, it's free. But paid stuff, it's hard. Like you have to know when to post it, how to present it, how to talk about it. There's this really weird balancing act between hyping your product and being honest about the fact that, look, this is a product. And I think the more effort the more effort you put in, the better the product looks, the more impressive it is, and the smarter you are about promoting it on sites like that. Sometimes you'll get stuff that, paid or not, will get traction and attention, and you could post the same thing the next day at the same time and it flops because everybody downvotes it. That's how it is.
Yeah, it's a tough gig. Yeah, Reddit, I kind of refer to that, or I do refer to that as the douchiest place on the internet. Like, and they hate self-promotion over there, not just paid stuff. Because, we have a website and a blog, so I'm like, here's an article, check it out, and we can talk about it here if you like. Yeah, but no, they want you to rewrite that article on Reddit. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. So, yeah, we've had our own struggle with Reddit and kind of just given up on it. And with anything, like for anybody that's trying to do something, create something, the social medias that you should hang out on are the ones you actually enjoy being on. If it's painful for you, probably stay away. And that's been kind of our relationship with Reddit. I know we did. I did like a review of the Lazy Dungeon Master and put it up over there, and they went at it with a red marker. It was awful. I am not the best technical writer, that is for sure. So TrueMate says, with 170 new spells, are there any high-level spells that you think were particularly awesome?
I think with Convert, we didn't have a lot of high-level ones.
We had very few of the high level ones because we wanted to have as many in there that we could have as domain or oath spells, which don't go very. They only go up to like fifth
level. Yeah.
So, but there are a couple because I remember, and actually it comes from like ones that I did before. Really, I brought this project to a collaboration. I have with Arl. You have Heart of Ice, which is a 7th level necromancy spell, where you could basically, it's almost like turning into stone, but it turns them into a chunk of ice. And if they get broken, then they're pretty much, after they get turned into ice, it's just like if they were turned to stone and got broken. So it'd be very ugly. Or ice is even more delicate. So the sun comes out and it melts. They're in trouble. So they need to find some way to get that effect to be like a wish or something like that to get back to where they won't die from that one. But we didn't want to make the book too large and have it mostly like a spell book too. So we got so many spells in it just with the first through fifth level spells. So
Yeah.
that's where we took it.
Because the core of the focus with the spell conversions was, as we said, to flesh out the domain and oath spell lists, which is limited between first and fifth level. We have a couple examples. I know that for some of the deities that I did, I had a couple cantrips that get added as class features. Like the cleric oath gives you access to this cantrip, which is listed at the end of the deity section. But mostly it wasn't about this being a spell book, like Scott said. It was more about empowering the class archetypes that we were including, which does limit it to the lower end of the spell spectrum, but the focus was on the archetypes themselves.
So Douglas wants to know, can each of you say your favorite Forgotten Realms novel?
I would think the Halfling's Gem is one of my favorite. I've read all the Dark Elf, just about all of them. And I'm a big Salvatore fan.
And I would it's funny because I've not read a lot of Forgotten Realms ones. I've had a bunch of Dragonlance books on my shelf because I still kept with that, from when I first jumped into Dragonlance. But I've read it's been a long time since I've read any Forgotten Realms ones, but I enjoyed Homeland, the kind of prequel bit, for Drizzt that got started up. I'm like a lot of people, I'm kind of ambivalent towards Drizzt as a character. I understand the whole, eye rolling, he's a good drow, or he's Mary Sue, or whatever arguments you want to make. But I really like the prequel trilogy because, especially Homeland, wasn't really about Drizzt. It was about the drow society, which is just brutal, but it's fascinating. I like seeing a real in-depth, novelization of their society and their culture and stuff. I thought it was a real cool take on it.
Yeah, and the Underdark as well. I mean, actually, that was actually, in my opinion, was the best Drizzt novels, because they're the ones where the character actually grows and changes, and the rest is he's locked in this time capsule, and he never changes throughout the stories. He's just always stays the same. And so and I don't know how many of the Drizzt novels I read before I finally dropped off and kind of got bored with the character because I felt like he never changed. For me, I think in terms of series, when I think of my favorite Forgotten Realms, and for me, the three that really kind of stuck out were the Maztica trilogy, Time of Troubles, and Threat from the Sea. I would be hard pressed to pick a favorite though, but it's one of those series for sure. And honestly, in each one of them they did something really different, and that's why I really kind of gravitate towards them. Threat to the Frozen Sea, you really gotta look at the the Sahagan and some of the aquatic races, as well as the character arcs and development were really good. Maztica was really a different take. It was the Conquistador, Spanish Conquistadors, kind of fused into D&D, so that was really cool. It was one of the early novels when they also introduced gunpowder, and they did some interesting things with mechanics that were in the game, but they explained them in the story that made it kind of cool. If coming from third edition, you wouldn't be familiar with dual classing, but it was something from AD&D that they actually worked into the book, and it was done really well. And then the Time of Troubles was just the whole premise was just really cool. The idea of gods, being cast down to Faerun and having to earn their followers, and the idea that it completely changed how faith worked in the world. And how important the different followers became to each deity. So I each of those was for different reasons were probably my favorites.
I'm gonna have to check those out.
Yeah, they're a little bit older ones, so.
I'm just waiting for them to finally open up a Dragonlance 5th edition setting, or at least open it up so that guild creators can get on it. Because I know a lot of people like the Chronicles trilogy, the Dragons of Autumn Twilight, the core stuff. But the first Dragonlance book I ever picked up was the Doom Brigade, which is following the Draconian Army Regiment of Engineers after the war, and they're just a bunch of war-weary, tired deserters who just want to live in a valley and raid dwarves for ale and live their life away from conflict, and they're done with the whole evil army crap. And it was actually I was really young when I picked that up, and I love that book, and it's actually been really informative to me for how I like to approach adventures and how I like to approach the stories I tell in my games and stuff. Because in the core books, they're treated as the Draconians are not like the Dragonborn in Forgotten Realms 5th edition, where they can be whatever they want. They are a created race of evil dragon men, and it was really fun seeing that perspective twisted around in Dragonlance, to where here's this book where it's like, no, they're just people, and they're just a bunch of war-weary army guys who are done fighting. But
did you read the sequel?
Oh, Draconian Measures, yeah.
Yeah, it was good stuff. I'm a little disappointed we didn't get another, get a third book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could have kept reading those forever. It was a great series, and I loved like the opening of Doom Brigade with the interplay between them and the dwarves, where they would each raid each other, and it kind of reminded me like of Native American culture a little bit, in like the Counting Coup kind of way, where they actually kind of went out of their way not to like harm each other, just to steal from each other.
It's like a gentleman's agreement that they don't kill each other, because then everyone is just going to end up dead, but they'll knock each other around, and
So that is actually a couple of my favorite books as well. And the second book introduces the idea of, it actually makes Draconians a viable race. Right. So I guess I won't say, I don't remember how early they introduced the concept or whatever in that series. So in case that's a spoiler or whatever, I won't mention it. But yeah, Draconians was like one of the coolest parts about Dragonlance series, and they are not Dragonborn. They're way cooler than Dragonborn. So I would definitely like to see that revisited, as well as Kryn as a whole for D&D. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem like Wizards of the Coast is going to do setting books. Like, we got Ravenloft, but that's because Ravenloft was an adventure first, and they were able to kind of finagle that. Like, I guess we might get Spelljammer if they do like a spell jamming adventure, which would work because you can do that from anywhere. But some of the more obscure settings like Dark Sun, I don't know how they're going to figure that out, or if we're going to ever see something like that.
Okay, Wizards of the Coast, I know that you just finished your latest draft of your new book, and I know that it's like 289 pages or something insane, according to Chris Perkins on Twitter. Everyone wants it to be the Great Modron March, okay? Just go ahead and make it so that they travel through all of the planes and double that campaign as a planar source book, and we'll call it good. All right? Okay, just you and me.
That would be amazing. That would be awesome. And that also would work pretty well. I know they're going to do Ebron. Like, I've heard from people
tease that too much not to do that eventually.
Yeah. I've heard from people on the inside, different people, that they're going to do it. It's just a matter of time. And I know Keith Baker is like chomping at the bit to write in there again, but he can't. So he just blogs. There's plenty of blog articles about Ebron that people can check out. See, James Leslie has a question. Do you guys use any particular style or format for your submission to the DMs Guild? I know they have a template over there, but I find it's kind of poorly done, and not a lot of explanation.
As a matter of fact, in this, I've had some collaborations with MT Black, and he gave me a Word template that I used to do the initial formatting, but I ended up doing everything in InDesign, which I really wanted to learn that because it's an industry standard, especially in publishing for print. And I used One Bookshelf. If you do use InDesign or Adobe products, they do have a template on One Bookshelf. I used the link from the emails I got, but I'm sure it's somewhere on the website in their knowledge base. And that's what I used, and it's caused me a little extra work on this project because first we didn't think it was going to be published for print. I just developed it for digital, and then when I went and got the template, and then I was like trying to put that together, and I realized, well, I have to basically redo this. So it caused me a lot of, and then it caused me some copy paste errors and things like that. But yeah, it's nice to develop your own style. And it's difficult if you don't know Word extensively or professionally. And then the templates they're all set to one style, so it doesn't help you to kind of develop your own artistic style with that. So, but as far as talking about styles, you could do that if you go up and look at the styles panel and start formatting like headers and paragraphs, your normal paragraph compared to an indented paragraph, your spacing in your words and things like that. And I'm not really good with like putting artwork in there with Word and getting it to integrate well with the layout. And that's it. I do it much better in InDesign. But yeah, that's it. It's a difficult aspect to it, and it's part of what I see as an approach to this, especially if you're new in the business, is take it as a learning journey, like a lifelong learning journey that never stops. Always looking for something to learn, and there are fairly cheap video tutorials or even free ones if you go to YouTube or something like that, and that might show you how to work with styles in Word, or maybe even some of the open source document like Open Office or something like that. So it just really depends on. There's so many different software, and then software out there is a big part of working with developing these products.
And I, for my part, I never have used InDesign. All my stuff is laid out in Word, which I imagine for, especially if someone's if someone's newer to making stuff on the guild, unless they really want to jump right into it, most people probably don't have InDesign readily available, or they might, be reluctant to spend that kind of money because Adobe stuff is expensive. So I've always done Word. Now at this point, I don't know if I even would switch to InDesign, even though I probably could. Just because I've gotten really comfortable doing all kinds of, you can get away with all kinds of silly tricks and stuff to make a good layout in Word, including with images and stuff like that. I know that there's some resources out there. Like Scott said, YouTube has stuff. People who are interested specifically in like their DM's Guild products can go to James Introcasso's blog, World Builder blog, has I think some articles for like getting art, how to lay it out. Chris Bassett's Loot the Room blog has a series of articles on how he made an adventure, and he does the layout and formatting in Word, I'm pretty sure, and he has a lot of specific pointers for how to do template and layout, including art and text and everything else, which I think would be pretty helpful for people looking to get into it. Because the default adventure template on the DM's Guild is junk. It's 100% junk. And it does not look very, very good. And it's it's white text, it's white background, black text, kind of weird stuff, and everyone's going to know if you're just using the default template. And people like to see products that are dressed up a little bit more. That's just kind of how it is. So
it's like anything, like especially when you're a one-man show, you have to learn all these new skills because writing the content is its own skill. Knowing how the mechanics are written by Wizards of the Coast is its own thing. There's kind of like their style. If you want your products to be congruent with what's being put out there and people are kind of used to, art direction is its own skill itself, as well as the layout of the page. So all that, everything you're doing, there's individuals that would do that job in a company. So, I totally get that and understand that, even, and then you got to market stuff. So, and each piece of social media marketing could be somebody's job, but then when you're the person doing it all, you realize you're doing a ton of jobs. So, if you're going to start putting things anywhere and being successful as a creator, you're going to work your ass off.
Absolutely.
Unless you get very lucky. I mean, we're fortunate in the person that does our website, Doug, works for a newspaper doing layout. So, he's already kind of familiar with doing layout, and he's been learning even more stuff to do products for us and put and help us put our Patreon awards together so they look better. And after having been the editor on our website now for over a year, he's pretty much mastered the way Wizards of the Coast presents information so that we can stay congruent with what they're doing. So for anyone that's looking to get into creating content, just know there's a lot of skills you're going to have to learn. But that being said, not to intimidate people or steer them away, but it's kind of like Scott said, it's a journey you're going to go on, and probably your best bet is just one, get started, and two, start small and just work your way up. As you get more comfortable, you'll be able to expand what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So we are coming up on the hour mark. Final words from you guys? You said a mouthful there.
Yeah, I hope you like the product and you consider taking a look at it when we release it. It'll be about a month, and there's a lot there to create immersive detail in your campaign, whether you're a player or a dungeon master. And thanks for coming today, and thanks for having us on the show. Good being here.
It's good having you on. Yeah, so check these guys out individually. There's links in the description. Follow them on social media, so when it does drop, you'll know it's out there. You're gonna, if you're interested in Forgotten Realms or just more content for your D&D game, there's going to be a ton of domains. You're going to get paladin oaths, spells, magic items, holy text, which we didn't even get into that. So is that like a magic idol?
No, we in older editions, the holy texts are magic items. For the chapter, I ended up just because I wrote that bit. I ended up not doing these full-on conversions because I thought we had plenty of crunch and stuff like that. But it was just this chapter about holy books that temples would use, and that that clerics and paladins, if they're carrying a holy book, they're the real deal. And then there are actual specific, they're basically like artifacts, but we didn't treat them like magic items. We treated them as more of a role playing angle of this is a holy book of Gond, but instead of a book, it's a cube that has information on these little bits that you can activate, and they slide out, and then you can read the bits that slide out. Not all of them are physical books. They're kind of unique to the different deities, and there's about 20 of them in there. And we decided we wanted to include those because those are just cool. Those are just the kind of things that you know, you can, as a DM, we want people to put whatever contents they want into those holy texts, but we want people to be aware of them and, you know, put them in their DM toolbox, because you could put a whole, you know, a whole adventure, a whole campaign around, you know, finding this unique holy text that's so important to a given deity. You know, there could be holy wars just to acquire this, you know, this unique text and make sure it's used, you know, acquired by its faith or whatever. So, you know, that was definitely a mixture between item and role playing focus section.
That definitely sounds cool. Right away, role playing scenarios and social interactions start springing to mind. In addition to, like you said, you could do a whole campaign arcs just based around that one nugget. So, guys, keep on that lookout, and hey, stick around because Ingest Quest will be starting soon. Nerder Doug will be running the crew through another spell jamming session, and I'm sure there will be food involved because there always is for some reason. So until next time, folks, stay nerdy.